"Cure my mother and you can call me your husband," said the millionaire, but he froze when... Harrison Reed was desperate. For 3 months, his mother, Mrs. Martha, had been wasting away at Chicago General Hospital, with no doctor able to explain her condition. The woman who had once been so strong could now barely speak. It was then that he saw the nurse Sarah Sullivan caring for his mother with a dedication no other professional had shown. Without thinking twice, Harrison made the most absurd proposal of his life. "Listen here, young lady. If you cure my mother, you can call me your husband. I'll give you everything a woman could ever dream of." Sarah stopped what she was doing and looked at him with an expression of utter disbelief. Her hand still held Mrs. Martha's hand gently, as she seemed to sleep peacefully for the first time in weeks. "Sorry. What did you just say?" she asked, thinking she'd heard him wrong. "You heard me right. Marry me if you can make my mother get better. Money is no problem. I can make you live like a queen." The young nurse, only 28 years old, felt a mixture of anger and pity for that elegantly dressed man with his well-groomed hair. Her first instinct was to call security, but something in the desperation in his eyes made her hesitate. "You can't possibly be serious," she said, keeping her voice low so as not to disturb the patient. "I've never been more serious in my entire life. I'm 42 years old, I've never married, I have more money than I can ever spend, and my mother is the only thing that matters to me in this world. If the doctors can't cure her, maybe you can." Sarah looked at Mrs. Martha. The white-haired woman, her face marked by time, was breathing with difficulty. In recent days, only Sarah had managed to get the elderly woman to accept a little food or take her medicine without resistance. "Mr. Reed, I'm not a doctor. I'm just a nurse who does her job with care, and I'm definitely not for sale." "It's not a sale, it's an agreement that could save my mother's life. Your mother doesn't need to be saved by some bizarre agreement. She needs care, attention, and maybe a little genuine love from her own son." Sarah's words hit Harrison like a punch in the gut. He hadn't expected such a direct and courageous response from someone who didn't even know him well. "You don't understand. I've already spent millions of dollars on private treatments. I've brought the best specialists from this country and abroad. Nothing works. But with you, she smiles. It was true. In the last 3 days, since Sarah had taken over direct care of Mrs. Martha, the elderly woman had shown small signs of improvement. Nothing the machines could measure, but changes that any attentive person would notice. "Mr. Reed, let me make you a different proposal. I'll keep taking care of your mother, because it's my job and because I like her. And you stop talking nonsense about marriage and start actually talking to her." "What do you mean? When was the last time you talked to your mother about something that wasn't her illness? When did you last tell her about your day, your plans, your worries?" Harrison fell silent. He couldn't remember. "I take care of her body. You need to take care of her heart." Sarah adjusted the blanket over Mrs. Martha and left the room, leaving Harrison alone with his confused thoughts. That night, the businessman couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the nurse's words. The next day, he arrived at the hospital earlier than usual and found Sarah bathing his mother. "Excuse me," he said, knocking on the door. "May I come in?" "Of course, we're almost done here." Harrison watched the patience and gentleness with which Sarah treated Mrs. Martha. Every movement was careful, every word was soft. His mother, who usually resisted procedures, was calm and even managed a faint smile. "There you go, Mrs. Martha. Now you're all fresh and comfortable," said Sarah, combing the elderly woman's grey hair. "Thank you, dear," Mrs. Martha murmured in a voice that was weak but clear. Harrison's eyes widened. For weeks, his mother hadn't spoken with such clarity. "Mum, how are you feeling?" Mrs. Martha turned her face toward her son, but her gaze seemed distant. "I'm doing better today," she replied simply. Sarah noticed Harrison's expression and felt a pang of compassion. It was obvious he loved his mother, but he didn't know how to show that love in a genuine way. "Mr. Reed, why don't you tell your mother about that new company project? She always loved hearing about your business." Harrison hesitated. It had been so long since he'd had a natural conversation with his mother that he didn't even know where to begin. "Mom, I'm building a new housing development. affordable homes for families who don't have a place to live. Mrs. Martha turned her face fully toward her son for the first time in weeks, her eyes revealing a spark of interest. "That's wonderful, my son. I always said you should help those in need." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now let's continue. The conversation lasted only a few minutes, but Harrison left the room with a strange feeling in his chest. It had been years since he'd heard his mother share her opinions or give advice. Sarah caught up with him in the hallway. "See? She just needed to feel like she still matters to you. But I've always known she matters. That's why I'm here every day. Being there physically is different from being there emotionally, Mr. Reed." Harrison stopped walking and looked at the nurse. There was something about the way she spoke that made him truly listen. "You're right. I don't know when I stopped really talking to her. I think it was when I started making a lot of money and she became different with me." "Different how?" "More distant, like she didn't recognize me anymore." Sarah sensed there was a deeper story there. In the following days, she observed the interactions between mother and son. Mrs. Martha responded better to medical care when Harrison was nearby, but there was a subtle tension in the air that she couldn't quite identify. One morning, while organizing Mrs. Martha's medications, Sarah found a small old photograph fallen behind the nightstand. It was the image of a little boy playing with a young woman in a simple backyard. The boy had the same eyes as Harrison, but the woman wasn't Mrs. Martha. "Mrs. Martha, who are these people in the photo?" Sarah asked gently. The elderly woman took the photo with trembling hands and her eyes filled with tears. "My Harrison, my little boy, with Esther." "Who was Esther?" She was like a daughter to me. She took care of Harrison when I couldn't." At that moment, Harrison walked into the room and went pale at the sight of the photograph in his mother's hands. "Mom, where were you keeping that?" "I always carried it with me, my son. Always." "Who is Esther?" Sarah asked, feeling she had stumbled onto something important. Harrison swallowed hard and left the room without answering. Sarah ran after him. "Mr. Reed, wait. If there's something important about your mother that I should know to take better care of her, please tell me." "That's none of your business," he replied sharply, but Sarah could see he was shaken. "Your mother said the name Esther several times in her sleep. She seems to be someone very important to her." Harrison stopped in the middle of the hallway and leaned against the wall. She was the woman who raised my mother when she was an orphan. She died when I was a child, but she was like a grandmother to me." "And why does that bother you so much?" "Because my mother always wanted me to be like Esther, simple, humble, helping others. And I became everything she didn't approve of." Sarah began to understand the complexity of the relationship between mother and son. Mrs. Martha wasn't just physically ill. She was carrying the weight of disappointment with her son's life choices. "Your mother loves you, Mr. Reed. But maybe she feels like she lost the son she once knew. And she's right. I'm not that boy in the photo anymore. But you can still be the man she'd want you to be." In the following days, Sarah noticed that Harrison started spending more real time with his mother. Not just sitting by the bed scrolling through his phone, but talking, telling stories, remembering the past. One afternoon, Sarah walked into the room and found mother and son looking through an old photo album together. "Look here, Mom. Remember when you taught me to plant tomatoes in the backyard at Esther's place?" "I do remember, my son. You'd get all dirty with soil, but you were the happiest boy in the world. I still like planting. I have a vegetable garden at my house." "You do?" asked Mrs. Martha, surprised. "I do. Every Sunday I take care of my tomatoes, and I always think of you when I'm out there." Sarah smiled discreetly. The Harrison who was opening up to his mother was very different from the arrogant businessman who had made that absurd proposal days earlier. But Mrs. Martha's improvement was unstable. There were good days and terrible days. On one particularly difficult morning, when the elderly woman refused to eat and seemed more confused than usual, Harrison panicked again. "Please," he said to Sarah, tears in his eyes. "My offer still stands. Anything you want. House, car, trips. Just make her better. Mr. Reed, money can't cure sadness, and your mother is sad. Sad about what? I give her everything. She doesn't want your things. She wants your time, your heart, the son she knew before you got rich. But I can't go back in time. I can't stop being who I am now. No one is asking you to stop being who you are, but you can choose to be a better version of yourself. Harrison grew thoughtful. That evening, instead of leaving as he always did, he stayed at the hospital until late. He helped Sarah feed Mrs. Martha dinner, and for the first time in years his mother ate a full meal. You know, Mom, I've been thinking about what you always said about helping others. What is it, my son? I want to do something good with my money, something that would make you proud. Mrs. Martha squeezed her son's hand with surprising strength. You've always made me proud, Harrison. I just wanted you to know that. Sarah watched the scene with emotion. She was witnessing something special happening between those two people. In the following days, she noticed a real change in Harrison's behavior. He started arriving earlier and leaving later. He brought flowers for his mother, told funny stories about his work, and even helped other patients when he saw they needed something. It was during one of these moments of help that Sarah discovered something surprising. Harrison was talking to Mr. Arthur, an elderly man in the next room, when he mentioned he was from Milwaukee. Milwaukee? Asked Harrison, interested. My mother was born there. What neighborhood? Arthur wanted to know. The neighborhood of Bridgeport. I knew a Martha Santos family that lived there, about 50 years ago. Harrison's eyes widened. Martha Santos is my mother. Impossible. The Martha I knew was a poor young woman who took care of an elderly lady named Esther. Esther was my adoptive grandmother, said Harrison, unable to believe the coincidence. Sarah, who was listening to the conversation from afar, approached. Mr. Arthur, you knew Mrs. Martha when she was young? I did, young lady. She was a saint. She took care of Esther as if she were her real mother, and she had a little boyfriend. What was the name again? James. James Miller. Harrison turned white as a sheet. James Miller. Yes, a hard-working young man. The two of them were in love, but he had to move to New York City for work. He never came back. Sarah noticed that Harrison was visibly shaken. Mr. Reed, are you all right? James Miller, he murmured. My father's name was James Miller. The silence that followed was heavy. Arthur looked back and forth in confusion, not understanding the tension in the air. Wait, Sarah said slowly. Are you saying that... My father abandoned my mother when he found out she was pregnant. She always told me he ran off to New York City and was never heard from again. I grew up hating that man. My goodness, Arthur sighed. So you're Martha's son with James. What a small world. Mr. Arthur, Sarah said carefully, what else do you remember about this story? Ah, it was a sad story. James didn't want to leave, but his father was sick and needed him to work in New York City to support the family. Martha was devastated, but she understood. They loved each other very much. So he didn't run away? Harrison asked, his voice choked with emotion. Run away? Not at all. The young man cried buckets when he had to leave. He promised to come back as soon as he saved up enough money. But then came the news that he had died in a work accident in New York City. Martha nearly went mad with grief. Harrison had to lean against the wall. His whole life he had built an image of abandonment and rejection that apparently had never been real. Mr. Arthur, Sarah said, are you sure that's what happened? Absolutely. I was the one who brought the news to Martha. James's brother came from New York City to tell her. She was already about 6 months pregnant. My mother never told me that, Harrison said, tears in his eyes. Maybe she wanted to protect you from the pain, Sarah suggested softly. Harrison walked into his mother's room a different man. Mrs. Martha was awake, looking out the window. Mum, we need to talk. About what, my son? About my father. About James Miller. Mrs. Martha closed her eyes as if an old pain had come back. Why did you never tell me the truth about him? What truth? That he didn't run away, that he died trying to take care of his family. Mrs. Martha opened her eyes and looked at her son in surprise. How do you know that? I met Mr. Arthur, he told me. The elderly woman was silent for a long time. I wanted you to grow up without hatred in your heart, she said finally. If you knew your father died trying to be a good man, you would suffer even more for never having known him. But I grew up hating him, Mom, and some of that hatred spilled onto you. What do you mean? I became everything I thought he wasn't, rich, successful, powerful, to prove I was better than the man who abandoned us. But in the process, I became someone you no longer recognize. Mrs. Martha reached out a trembling hand to touch her son's face. My Harrison, my boy, I always recognized you. I always loved you. I was just waiting for you to remember who you really are. It was Harrison's turn to cry like he hadn't since he was a child. Sarah, watching from the doorway, felt her own eyes fill with tears. In the following days, Harrison's transformation was remarkable. He started bringing his guitar to play the old songs Mrs. Martha loved. He brought home-cooked meals made by his cook based on the recipes his mother had taught her. And more importantly, he started talking about his feelings for real. Sarah began to see the man behind the money. Harrison was intelligent, funny when relaxed, and had a sensitivity he hid behind his tough businessman demeanor. One afternoon, while Mrs. Martha was dozing off, Harrison struck up a conversation with Sarah. I want to apologize for that stupid proposal. It's already forgiven. Desperate people do desperate things. It wasn't just desperation. It was plain ignorance. I thought I could buy anything, including love and dedication. And now I know that some things can't be bought. They have to be earned. Sarah smiled. It was the first time she had seen Harrison being genuinely humble. Can I ask you a question? He said. Of course. Why do you care for people so tenderly? Is it just a job or is it something more? Sarah was thoughtful before answering. My grandmother on my mother's side was a nurse. She always said that caring for people is caring for pieces of God. Every person who passes through our hands has a story, a family, dreams. When we take good care of someone, we're honoring all of that story. Your grandmother sounds like she was a special person. She was. She died when I was 15, but everything I know about being a nurse I learned by watching her. What was her name? Maria Esther Sullivan. Harrison nearly dropped the coffee he was drinking. Esther Sullivan? Yes. Why? Esther, who took care of an orphan girl in Milwaukee. Now it was Sarah's turn to be surprised. How do you know that? Because that orphan girl was my mother. The silence that followed was absolute. They both looked at Mrs. Martha, who was sleeping peacefully, unaware of the extraordinary discovery that had just taken place. So you're, Harrison began. The granddaughter of the woman who raised your mother, Sarah finished, still processing the information. That's why you care for her so tenderly. It's not just a job. I didn't even know. My grandmother died when I was a teenager and never told me details about the people she cared for. She only said she had a special girl she considered a daughter. And that special girl became my mother. Harrison and Sarah looked at each other with a new understanding. There was something greater that had connected them from the very first day. Now I understand why my mother responded so well to your care, Harrison said. You have the same way about you as Esther, the same tenderness. And now I understand why I felt so connected to Mrs. Martha from the very first day. That night, Harrison went home with his mind racing. He searched through his personal files and found a box of old documents his mother had given him years ago and that he had never opened. Inside the box, he found letters. Dozens of letters that Esther had written to Mrs. Martha over the years, and in several of them she mentioned her granddaughter, Sarah. Martha, my dear daughter of my heart, my little granddaughter Sarah said she wants to be a nurse just like me. What a pride. I hope that one day she can care for special people like you. Harrison couldn't sleep. The next day, he arrived at the hospital with the letters in his hands. Sarah, you need to see this. She read the letters with tears streaming down her face. My grandmother wrote about your mother as if she were truly her daughter. And you're fulfilling your grandmother's wish without even knowing it. What do you mean? Your grandmother wanted you to care for special people, and there's no one more special in my life than my mother. Mrs. Martha, who had woken up during the conversation, asked to see the letters. My Esther, she murmured, kissing the yellowed pages. How I miss her. Mother, Harrison said softly. Sarah is Esther's granddaughter. Mrs. Martha looked at Sarah as if seeing her for the first time. Daughter of my Esther? Granddaughter, Mrs. Martha. I'm her granddaughter. Then you're my granddaughter too, the elderly woman said, extending her arms. Sarah stepped closer and was enveloped in a frail but loving embrace. Now I understand why I felt at home from the first day I started caring for you. And I understand why my heart felt at peace when you arrived, Mrs. Martha replied. Harrison watched the scene, moved. For the first time in months, his mother seemed truly happy. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and most importantly subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. From that day on, Mrs. Martha's recovery accelerated in a surprising way. It was no longer just a medical matter. It was a matter of the soul. She had found her family of the heart again. Harrison began including Sarah in decisions about his mother's treatment, respecting her opinion and knowledge. The nurse, in turn, began to see beyond the bizarre initial proposal and recognized a man who was rediscovering his humanity. One morning, Harrison arrived at the hospital with a different proposition. Sarah, I want to ask you something, and this time it's a serious, respectful question. I'm listening. Would you like to have dinner with me? Not because of my mother, not for money or an arrangement, just because I'd like to get to know the extraordinary person you are better. Sarah was surprised. It was the first time Harrison treated her as a woman, not as an employee or a tool to cure his mother. And your marriage proposal? That was from a desperate man who didn't know what to do. Now I'm just a man who would like to get to know an admirable woman better. And if I say no, then you said no, and I remain grateful for what you've done for my mother and for me. Sarah looked at Mrs. Martha, who was pretending to sleep but was clearly paying attention to the conversation. Mrs. Martha, what do you think? The elderly woman opened her eyes with a mischievous smile. I think my son finally learned how to make a decent invitation. Everyone laughed and Sarah accepted the dinner. That night, away from the hospital environment, Harrison and Sarah talked like two normal people. He told her about his loneliness, about how money had pushed genuine people away from his life. She talked about her calling, about how she had lost her parents at a young age and was raised by her nurse grandmother. You know, Sarah, I'd never thought about this, but maybe it's no coincidence that you came into my mother's life exactly when she needed it most. Maybe not. My grandmother always said that the right people show up at the right time if we're open to receiving them. I wasn't open to anything. I was just desperate. Sometimes desperation opens doors that arrogance keeps closed. Harrison laughed. You're very wise for being only 28 years old. I learned from the best. My grandmother used to say that age doesn't matter when you have an observant heart. When they returned to the hospital the next day, they found Mrs. Martha sitting up in bed for the first time in weeks. She was flipping through a photo album Harrison had brought days earlier. Mom, you managed to sit up on your own? I did, my son. I'm feeling stronger. That's great, Mrs. Martha, said Sarah, checking the elderly woman's vital signs. Your test results are much better too. It's because now I have reasons to get better, the lady replied with a smile. I have my son back, and I've gained a granddaughter. Harrison looked at Sarah and she returned the look with affection. Mom, it's still early to say that, but Sarah and I are getting to know each other better. That's good. But this time for the right reason, right, my son? This time for all the right reasons, Mrs. Martha clapped weakly but joyfully. Esther would be so happy to know our family has been reunited. Dr. Sterling, the doctor responsible for Mrs. Martha, walked in at that moment with a surprised expression. Mrs. Martha, your neurological tests have shown significant improvement. I can't explain it medically, but something has changed. Doctor, said Sarah, sometimes the medicine of the heart is more powerful than any remedy. It seems you've discovered the right formula, the doctor replied, smiling. In the following weeks, Mrs. Martha continued to improve. She was walking again with help, eating on her own, and joining in long conversations. Harrison completely changed his routine to spend more time with her. One afternoon he brought a surprise. "Mom, do you remember the vegetable garden I mentioned?" "I remember. I brought you some tomato seedlings to plant here at the hospital. There's a small garden on the ground floor." "Really? Can I actually plant them?" "Of course. And Sarah said she can help you on the days I can't come." Mrs. Martha smiled with a joy she hadn't shown in months. Esther always said that the earth cures any sorrow. "Then let's cure all the sorrow that's left," said Harrison, helping his mother to her feet. The hospital's small garden became Mrs. Martha's favorite place. She spent hours tending to the plants, with Harrison and Sarah taking turns keeping her company. It was there that Harrison finally asked the right question. "Sarah, can I ask you an important question?" "Go ahead." "Would you like to date me? For real? No rush, no strange arrangements. Just because I've fallen in love with the incredible woman you are." Sarah looked at Mrs. Martha, who was pretending to focus on the plants but was openly smiling. "Yes, but on one condition." "What is it?" "You stay the devoted son you've become, no matter what happens between us." "I promise." Mrs. Martha clapped her hands and nearly knocked over the watering can. "Finally, Esther must be laughing up in heaven seeing you two together." 6 months later, Harrison and Sarah were seriously dating. Mrs. Martha had been discharged and was living with her son, who had hired a home care team for when he and Sarah couldn't be there. The couple discovered they had much more in common than they had imagined. They both valued family, simplicity, and helping others. Harrison began involving Sarah in his business decisions, especially in the social projects he started to develop. "You know, Sarah, I have a crazy idea." "I'm listening." "How about we build a private hospital that provides free care to low-income families, a place where the care is as compassionate as yours?" "That would be wonderful, but it would cost a lot." "I have enough money, and now I know what money is really for." Mrs. Martha, who was listening to the conversation from the kitchen while making coffee, smiled proudly. "My son finally understood what Esther always tried to teach him," she murmured to herself. The hospital project began to take shape. Harrison invested not only money, but also personal time in the planning. Sarah helped design the compassionate care protocols. Mrs. Martha, with her health restored, began visiting the construction site and offering suggestions based on her experience as a patient. But not everything was easy. Harrison's family, who hadn't had close contact with him in years, showed up when they learned about his new social projects and his relationship with a nurse. Aunt Beatrice, Mrs. Martha's younger sister, arrived from New York City with a critical attitude. "Harrison, does your father know you're throwing money away on this nonsense?" "My mother is supporting all my decisions, Aunt Beatrice." Martha was always a dreamer. "But you need to think about the family's future, about the inheritance. The legacy I want to leave isn't just money." Beatrice looked at Sarah with thinly veiled contempt. "And this girl? Are you sure she isn't just interested in your money?" "I'm absolutely sure," Harrison replied without hesitation. "How can you be so sure?" "Because she turned down my first proposal when I offered exactly that, money in exchange for favors." Mrs. Martha, who had overheard the conversation, intervened. "Beatrice, Sarah is Esther's granddaughter, the same Esther who raised me." "Esther, the nurse who took care of you when we were children?" "The same one, and Sarah has her grandmother's heart." Beatrice was taken aback. She remembered Esther well and knew how much her sister had loved her. "Even so, Harrison, you need to be cautious. Women can be very convincing when they want to be." Sarah, who had remained silent until then, decided to speak up. "Mrs. Martha, I understand your concern for your nephew, but I can assure you that I don't need his money to be happy. I have my job, my independence, and my principles." "Principles don't pay the bills." "No, but they guarantee that I sleep in peace every night." Sarah's answer impressed even Martha, who had expected a defensive reaction. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us, who are just starting out. Now continuing. In the following months, Martha returned a few times to observe the couple. Gradually, she began to notice that Harrison was genuinely happy and that Sarah truly showed no interest in material things. The community hospital began to be built. Harrison made sure that Sarah oversaw every aspect related to patient care. She split her time between her job at Chicago General Hospital and the new project. It was during one of those visits to the construction site that Harrison received a call that would change everything once again. "Mr. Reed, this is Dr. Bennett from the Clinical Analysis Laboratory. We have the results of the genetic tests you requested." "And? Sir, there's something you need to know in person. Can you come in today?" Harrison grew worried. He had requested genetic tests for Mrs. Martha as part of a full checkup after her recovery. "Sarah, can you come with me to the lab? I got a strange call." "Of course, did something happen?" "I don't know. Let's find out." At the laboratory, Dr. Bennett received them with a serious expression. "Mr. Reed, your mother's tests revealed something unexpected. There are genetic markers that indicate that the two of you are not blood-related." The world stopped for Harrison. "What do you mean?" "Mrs. Martha is not your biological mother." "That's impossible. I have a birth certificate, documents." "The documents may be legally correct, but biologically, she is not your mother." Harrison left the laboratory in a state of shock. Sarah tried to comfort him, but he was visibly shaken. "My whole life has been a lie," he said, pacing in circles on the sidewalk. "Harrison, calm down. Let's talk to Mrs. Martha. There must be an explanation." "What explanation could there be? She lied to me my whole life. Or she protected you from something, just like she did with the story about your father." They went home in silence. Mrs. Martha immediately noticed that something was wrong. "What's with that look, my son?" Harrison showed her the test results. Mrs. Martha read them in silence, tears streaming down her face. "Now you know," she said simply. "Know what, Mum? That you've lied to me all along? That I chose you. That you were the best choice of my life." "You chose me?" Mrs. Martha took a deep breath and began to tell a story she had kept hidden for decades. "When Esther died, I was lost. I was 18 years old and had no one in the world. That's when I met a young woman my age who was pregnant and afraid. Her boyfriend had disappeared and her family had kicked her out of the house." Harrison and Sarah listened in absolute silence. "She wasn't in any condition to raise a child. She was starving, sleeping on the streets. When you were born, she asked me to take care of you while she got back on her feet." "And she never came back?" "She did, 2 weeks later. But she saw how I was taking care of you, saw the love in my eyes and said you would be happier with me. She gave me all the documents and disappeared." "And my father?" "James Miller was my boyfriend, not hers. When I told him about you, he said we would be a family, that you would be our son at heart. But then he died in the accident and I raised you alone." Harrison needed to sit down. His entire life was being rewritten before his eyes. "So the story Mr. Arthur told up, it was real. James loved me and wanted to come back to marry me and raise you as his own son. He never knew you weren't biologically ours. And you never told me because you were my son, in every way that matters. I chose you. I raised you. I loved you more than anything. And I was afraid that if you knew the truth, you'd think our love wasn't real." Sarah, who had been listening in silence, finally spoke. "Mrs. Martha, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard in my life." "Sarah's right, Mum. You gave me something my biological mother couldn't give me, unconditional love and a real family." "So you're not angry with me?" Harrison hugged Mrs. Martha with all the strength he had. "I'm proud to have been chosen by the most amazing woman in the world." That night, the three of them had dinner together as a family for the first time. Harrison told funny stories from the company. Sarah talked about the patients at the hospital, and Mrs. Martha shared old memories of Esther. "You know, Sarah," said Mrs. Martha, "Esther always used to say that family isn't blood, it's choice. She chose me when I was an orphan. I chose Harrison when he needed a mother, and now the two of you are choosing each other." "You're right," Sarah replied, "and I choose the two of you too." Harrison held the hands of the two most important women in his life. Then we're officially a wonderfully crazy family built on choices of the heart. The best family in the world, said Mrs. Martha. The community hospital was inaugurated a year later on the anniversary of Mrs. Martha's discharge. Harrison insisted the name be the Esther Sullivan Medical Center in honor of the woman who had planted the seeds of love that blossomed in their lives. Sarah became the director of nursing at the new hospital, implementing humanized care protocols that became a benchmark in the region. Harrison discovered a genuine passion for social work and began dedicating half of his time to the hospital's projects. Mrs. Martha, fully recovered, became the hospital's unofficial ambassador. She visited patients, told stories, and brought plants from her garden to brighten up the rooms. On a special afternoon, Harrison proposed to Sarah in the hospital garden in the same spot where she had planted the first tomatoes with Mrs. Martha. "Sarah Sullivan, will you marry me? Not because I promised it when I was desperate, but because you're the woman I want by my side for the rest of my life. Harrison Reed, I'll marry you, because you've become the man I can truly love." Mrs. Martha, watching hidden behind a tree, couldn't hold back her tears of joy. The wedding was simple, held at the hospital itself. The patients watched from the windows and the balcony, throwing flower petals that Mrs. Martha had grown especially for the occasion. During the ceremony, the priest made a remark that moved everyone. "Harrison and Sarah, you found each other in an unusual way, through caring for those you love. May that mutual care be the foundation of your marriage." At the small, cozy reception, Harrison gave a speech that surprised everyone present. "I want to thank the 3 women who changed my life. First, Esther, who, even though I never met her in person, planted seeds of kindness that reached me through her granddaughter. Second, my mother Martha, who chose me to be her son when I needed love the most. And third, Sarah, who taught me that the richest person in the world is the one who has a real family." "And I want to give thanks," said Sarah, taking the microphone, "to my grandmother Esther, who taught me that caring for people is the most important job in the world, to Mrs. Martha, who adopted me as a granddaughter of the heart, and to Harrison, who showed me that people can change when they find the right reasons." "Mrs." Martha asked to speak as well. "I want to thank Esther, who, even though she's no longer here, kept taking care of me through her granddaughter. I want to thank Harrison, who taught me that a mother and son's love doesn't need blood to be real. And I want to thank Sarah, who brought our family back to life. 3 years later, Harrison and Sarah had a little daughter, Claire, who grew up playing among the plants in the hospital garden. Mrs. Martha, now 74 and in perfect health, was the most present and loving grandmother a child could have. The Esther Sullivan Medical Center had become a reference in humanized care. Harrison expanded the project to other cities, always with Sarah supervising the nursing department. On a Sunday afternoon, while the whole family tended the garden at home, Claire asked an innocent question that drew laughter from everyone. "Grandma Martha, why did Mommy and Daddy meet at the hospital?" "Because, my dear granddaughter, sometimes God puts the right people in the right places at the right time. And were you at the hospital too?" "I was. I needed to be taken care of, and your Mommy showed up to take care of me, and your Daddy showed up to learn how to truly care. And now we all take care of each other?" "Exactly," said Harrison, picking up his daughter. "That's how real families work." Sarah watched the scene with a full heart. The absurd proposal she had received years ago had turned into the most beautiful love story she could imagine. Not the love that is bought, but the love that is earned through care, respect, and mutual dedication. "You know, Harrison," she said, while watering the plants, "your first proposal ended up coming true." "How so?" "I healed your mother, and you became my husband." "Ah, but now for completely different reasons." "The right reasons," completed Mrs. Martha, smiling. Claire, who listened to everything without fully understanding, asked another question. "Daddy, what is the right reason?" "The right reason, my daughter, is when we do things out of love, not out of interest. It's when we take care of people because we want to see them happy, not because we expect something in return. Like Mommy took care of Grandma. Exactly like Mommy took care of Grandma." That night, after Claire fell asleep, the couple talked on the porch, while Mrs. Martha watched her favorite soap opera in the living room. "Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I had accepted your initial proposal," said Sarah. "It would have been a disaster. I would still be the same arrogant man as before. You would have felt humiliated, and my mother probably wouldn't have recovered. And now we are a real family, built on solid foundations. Don't you regret having changed so much?" "I didn't change that much, Sarah. I just remembered who I really was underneath all that money and arrogance. And who were you really? The boy who planted tomatoes with his mother and dreamed of helping people." Mrs. Martha appeared on the porch with 3 cups of coffee. "Can I join you?" "Of course, Mom, always." The 3 stayed talking until late, planning new projects for the hospital and dreaming about Claire's future. "Esther would be proud to see what our family has become," said Mrs. Martha. "You're right," agreed Sarah. "She planted seeds of kindness that are still bearing fruit today. And they will keep bearing fruit for generations," added Harrison, looking at the door of the room where Claire slept. Years passed. Harrison became known not for his wealth but for his social work. Sarah developed humanized nursing techniques that were adopted in hospitals across the country. Mrs. Martha lived to see Claire grow up and graduate in medicine, choosing to work at the family hospital. On an autumn afternoon, when Claire was 22 years old and had just graduated, the whole family gathered in the original garden of the Esther Sullivan Medical Center. "Grandma Martha," said Claire, "tell me again the story of how my parents met." "Ah, my dear granddaughter, it's a long story full of surprises." "I have time," replied Claire, sitting on the grass beside her grandmother. "It all started with a completely crazy proposal from your father," began Mrs. Martha, her eyes sparkling. Harrison and Sarah looked at each other and laughed, remembering the troubled beginning of their story. "Dad made a crazy proposal?" asked Claire, curious. "He sure did. He offered marriage to your mother in exchange for curing me." "Wow! And what did Mom answer?" "Your mother said some things can't be bought," replied Sarah. "And she was right. But you did get married." "We did get married," said Harrison. "But for the right reason, because we truly fell in love." "And Grandma got cured?" "I did, but not because of the medicine or expensive treatments. I was cured by love. Love from your father, who learned to be a true son. Love from your mother, who took care of me the way Esther would have. And love from our whole family, which came together through choices of the heart." Claire hugged her grandmother. "What a beautiful story, Grandma. It's almost impossible to believe." "Well, it's true, my dear. And the most incredible part is that it all started with your father being a complete idiot," said Mrs. Martha, prompting laughter all around. "Hey!" protested Harrison. "I was desperate." "You really were," agreed Sarah. "And it was that desperation that broke through your arrogance and let your heart show." That night, after Claire went home, she had married a doctor she met in medical school the year before. Harrison, Sarah, and Mrs. Martha stayed talking on the porch. "You know what?" said Harrison. "I never properly thanked you, Sarah." "Why?" "For seeing beyond my stupid proposal, for taking care of my mother when I didn't know how, for teaching me what true love is." "And I never thanked you," replied Sarah. "Why?" "For giving me the family I always dreamed of, for becoming the man I could love, for letting me be part of your story." Mrs. Martha listened, moved. "And I thank you both for giving me the happiest years of my life, for proving that family is so much more than blood." "It's a choice," said Harrison and Sarah at the same time, repeating the words Mrs. Martha always said. The Esther Sullivan Medical Center kept growing. Harrison opened branches in several cities, always following the humanized care model that Sarah had developed. The couple became an example of how love can transform people and build genuine legacies. Claire, now with her medical degree, took over the medical coordination of one of the newest branches. She married David, a pediatrician who shared the same family values. Mrs. Martha, at 78 years old, remained active and present in everyone's lives. She tended the garden, welcomed patients with smiles and warmth, and always had an inspiring story to tell. On a special afternoon, the whole family gathered to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of the first Esther Sullivan Medical Center. During the party, Harrison gave an emotional speech. 10 years ago, I was a lost man who thought money could solve everything. I made a ridiculous proposal to a nurse, thinking I could buy a miracle. Today I look at my family and realize the miracle really did happen. Not because someone was bought, but because generous people taught me what truly matters in life. The audience applauded, but Harrison wasn't finished yet. I want to announce that we are creating a foundation that will train nurses in humanized care across Brazil. It will be named the Esther Sullivan Foundation, in honor of the woman who planted the first seeds of this love story. Sarah was moved. Harrison had consulted her about the foundation, but the surprise of the public announcement caught her off guard. Mrs. Martha went up to the stage with her grandson's help. I want to tell you something. 10 years ago, I was losing the will to live, not because of the illness, but because of the sadness of seeing my son drifting away from everything I had tried to teach him. Today, I see him multiplying kindness and building a legacy that will help thousands of people. Esther, wherever she is, must be very proud. The party continued through the night, but the most special moment happened when 3 generations of the family gathered in the hospital's original garden. "Grandma Martha," said Claire, "when I have children, I'm going to tell them this story." "What story?" "The story of how love can transform anything, of how a crazy proposal became the most united family in the world." "It's a good story to tell," agreed Mrs. Martha. "But remember to say that the most important part wasn't the happy ending. It was the path of transformation that each one had to walk." "What transformation did you go through, Grandma?" "I learned to trust that the love I gave always comes back in some way. I learned that I don't need to control other people's hearts, only to show my own heart." "And you, Daddy?" "I learned that being truly rich is having people who love me for who I am, not for what I have." "And you, Mommy?" "I learned that caring for someone with love can heal much more than any medicine." Claire hugged all 3 of them. "And I learned that family is the most precious thing in the world." That night, Harrison and Sarah stayed up talking in bed about future plans. "Sometimes I think it all started with a huge coincidence," said Sarah. "What coincidence?" "Me being assigned exactly to take care of your mother, being Esther's granddaughter." "It wasn't a coincidence," Harrison replied with conviction. "How can you be so sure?" "Because people like you and your grandmother leave marks on the world. Those marks connect across time and space. Your grandmother took care of my mother took care of me, and you took care of all of us." "That's a beautiful way to see it." "It's the only way to see it that makes sense." Sarah snuggled into her husband's shoulder. "Harrison." "Yes?" "Thank you for making that crazy proposal." "Why?" "Because without it, maybe we never would have discovered that we were perfect for each other, even though the proposal was completely wrong. Especially because it was completely wrong. It showed me who you were at that moment and gave me the chance to see who you could become." "And did you like what you saw?" "I liked the potential, and I fell in love with the result." Harrison laughed softly so as not to wake Mrs. Martha, who was sleeping in the next room. "Do you know what's most incredible about this whole story?" "What?" "My mother healed not because you agreed to get to know me better, but because I learned to know her better. And you healed too." "I healed?" "You healed from loneliness, from arrogance, from the idea that money solves everything. You became a whole person, only because I found the right people." "The right people were always there, Harrison. Your mother always loved you. You just needed to learn to receive and return that love in a healthy way." The next day, the family received an unexpected visit. It was Beatrice, Harrison's aunt, who had moved to Chicago to be closer to the family. "Harrison, I came to apologize." "Apologize for what, Aunt?" "For doubting Sarah, for thinking she was interested in your money. You were protecting our family, that's natural. But I was wrong. It's been 3 years that I've been watching you all, and I've never seen a more united couple or a happier family." Beatrice hugged Sarah. "Mrs. Beatrice, everything is forgiven now. What matters is that we're all family now. That's true. And I want to help at the hospital too. Can I volunteer?" "Of course," said Mrs. Martha. "We always need more hands to care for people." Beatrice became a dedicated volunteer, helping especially with elderly patients. She discovered a late calling for caring for people and found a fulfillment she had never experienced before. The circle of love and care continued to expand. 5 years after the initial proposal, Harrison was in the same hallway of the public hospital where it all had begun. This time he wasn't desperate. He was visiting patients with Claire, teaching his daughter about empathy and social responsibility. "Daddy, is this where you met Mommy?" "Yes, sweetheart, right here in this hallway." What was Mommy like back then? She was exactly as she is today, caring, smart, brave, and with a heart the size of the world. "And what about you, Daddy? What were you like?" Harrison laughed. Harrison: "I was a lost man who thought money could solve everything. And now? Now I'm a man who knows that love solves everything." Claire smiled and held her father's hand. "Daddy, when I grow up, I want to be just like Mommy." "What do you mean?" "I want to care for people with so much love that they get healed just from being near me." "That would be wonderful, sweetheart. But remember, each person has their own way of caring for others. Maybe yours will be different from Mommy's." "What would my way be?" "You'll discover that when you grow up. What matters is to always do things with love." They visited several patients that afternoon. Claire handed out drawings she had made, and Harrison talked with the families, offering emotional support and, when needed, practical help. At the end of the day, they found Sarah finishing her shift at the public hospital. She had decided to keep her job there even after becoming director of the social hospital. "How was your day?" she asked, kissing first her daughter and then her husband. "Wonderful," said Claire. "Daddy showed me where you two met, and we talked to lots of nice people." "That's great. And you, Harrison?" "It was special. Being in that hallway again reminded me of how much has changed. For the better. For infinitely better." Sarah smiled and held her husband's and daughter's hands. "Shall we go home? Grandma Martha promised to make brigadeiros for dessert." "Let's go," said Claire, excited. As they walked to the car, Harrison thought about the extraordinary journey his family had taken. It had all begun with a desperate and misguided proposal, but it had turned into something beautiful and true. "Sarah," he said before getting into the car. "Yes?" "Thank you for seeing past the foolish man I was and believing in the man I could become. Thank you for becoming that man." They kissed right there, in the hospital parking lot, just as they had for years. Claire made a fake, disgusted face, as every child does when they see their parents kissing, but deep down she was happy to have such a loving family. At home, Mrs. Martha was waiting for them with fresh brigadeiros and a smile that lit up the whole room. "How was the outing?" "Perfect, Grandma," Claire replied. "Daddy told me how you all met and how our family came to be." "And what did you think?" "I thought that sometimes the best things start in strange ways." "Very wise, my little granddaughter. Very wise." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. That night, after Claire fell asleep, the family gathered in the living room for their favorite ritual, looking through photo albums and reminiscing about special moments. "Look at this photo," said Sarah, pointing to a picture from the day they met. "Harrison looking like he was ready to buy the whole world. And you looking like you wanted to slap me?" Harrison laughed. "I really did. What a disrespectful proposal." "But that proposal is what started everything," recalled Mrs. Martha. "That's true. If Harrison had been polite and respectful from the start, maybe you two would have had only a professional relationship," Sarah agreed. "Sometimes we have to do everything wrong first to figure out how to do it right," Harrison philosophized. "Or perhaps," said Mrs. Martha thoughtfully, "you two were destined to meet, and the universe used the most unlikely situation possible to bring you together." "Do you believe in destiny, Mrs. Martha?" "I believe in love, Sarah, and love always finds a way." Years passed. The Esther Sullivan Foundation trained thousands of nurses across the country. The humanized care model developed by Sarah was adopted by public and private hospitals in several regions of the country. Harrison became a respected social entrepreneur, known for investing profits in projects that benefited underserved communities. He never made an inappropriate proposition to anyone again, but he also never forgot the lesson he learned that day at the hospital. Sarah earned a degree in hospital administration to better manage the family's projects, but she never completely gave up working directly with patients. Once a week, she worked a shift at the public hospital where it all began. Mrs. Martha lived to be 89, surrounded by love and watching her family grow. Claire got married, had children, and followed the family tradition of caring for people. Before she passed, Mrs. Martha gathered the whole family for one final conversation. "I want you to know that I lived a full and happy life. I saw my son become the man I always knew he could be. I saw my daughter-in-law become the daughter I never had. I saw my granddaughter grow up with strong values and a generous heart." "Grandma, don't talk like that," said Claire, overcome with emotion. "I need to say this, my dear granddaughter. I want you to keep taking care of each other the way you always have. I want you to keep helping people through the hospital, and I want you to always remember that love isn't bought. It's earned, it's nurtured, it's chosen every day." "We'll remember, Mum," Harrison promised. "Always," Sarah added. "Forever," Claire finished. Mrs. Martha smiled and closed her eyes in peace. Harrison and Sarah handled every detail of the funeral with the care Mrs. Martha deserved. The Esther Sullivan Medical Center closed for a day in honor of the family matriarch. Hundreds of people who had been touched by her kindness came to say goodbye. During the ceremony, Harrison gave a speech that moved everyone present. "My mother taught me that family is a choice. She chose me when I was a helpless baby. She chose to love me unconditionally for her entire life. And she taught me to choose as well. I chose Sarah to be my wife. I chose to be a present father to Claire. I chose to use my money to help other people. All of these choices came from the example she set for me." After the funeral, the family gathered at home for a simple dinner, just as Mrs. Martha always liked it. "Daddy," said Claire, "did Grandma leave anything written for us?" "Yes, she did. One letter for each of you." Harrison handed out 3 envelopes. Each one contained a personal, heartfelt message. Harrison's letter read, "My dear son, you became the man I always dreamed you would be. Keep planting seeds of kindness wherever you go. Take care of Sarah and Claire the way you took care of me. I love you forever. Mum." Sarah's letter read, "My daughter of the heart, thank you for taking care of me the way Esther would have. You honored your grandmother's legacy beautifully. Keep being the light that brightens people's lives. I love you like a daughter. Mother Martha." The letter to Sophia said, "My precious little granddaughter, you are proof that love multiplies through the generations. Always be brave like your mother, generous like your father, and keep our family united. I carry you in my heart forever. Grandma." The 3 letters ended with the same phrase. "Remember, family is a choice. Choose each other every day." Months passed. The family learned to live with the longing, but kept alive all the traditions that Mrs. Martha had established. The garden continued to be cared for collectively. The stories continued to be told. Love continued to be the foundation of every decision. On a spring afternoon, Harrison was tending to the tomatoes in the garden when Sarah approached with special news. "Harrison, I have something to tell you." "What is it?" "We're expecting another baby." Harrison put down the watering can and hugged his wife tightly. "Really? Really? Claire is going to have a little brother or sister? What wonderful news. My mother would be so happy." "She is happy. I'm sure of it." Claire, who arrived from college at that moment, witnessed her parents' emotional embrace. "Did something happen?" "You're going to be a big sister," said Sarah, beaming. "Really? How amazing. Grandma Martha always said our family would keep growing." "And she was right," said Harrison, embracing the 2 women of his life. The baby was born 9 months later, a boy named James Esther Reed, in honor of the father Harrison never knew, and the woman who had raised his mother. Claire became the loving, ever-present big sister. Harrison discovered that being a father for the second time at age 50 was even more special than it had been at 35. Sarah perfectly balanced motherhood with her work at the hospital. Little James grew up listening to the family stories. From a young age, he played in the hospital garden and showed the same natural warmth toward people that characterized his family. On a special afternoon, when James was 5 years old, the family visited Mrs. Martha's grave. It was tradition to do so on her birthday. "Grandma Martha," said Claire, placing fresh flowers on the grave, "we brought James to meet you." The boy, who had heard so many stories about his grandmother, approached the headstone. "Hi, Grandma. Daddy said you chose our whole family." Harrison and Sarah exchanged emotional glances. "He also said you were the kindest person in the world, and that I need to be just like you when I grow up." "You're already being just like her," said Harrison, picking up his son. "How?" "Taking care of people with affection, being kind to everyone, making people smile, like Mommy and like Claire. Like all of us, because Grandma Martha taught us that taking care of others is the most important thing in life." That night at home, the family gathered for dinner. The table was full. Harrison, Sarah, Claire, now 27 years old and married, her husband David, Aunt Beatrice, who had become an integral part of the family, and little James. "Dad," said Claire, "tell David and James the story of how you and Mom met." "Again?" laughed Harrison. "It's our family's favorite story," insisted James. "All right, it all started when I was a very foolish man who thought he could buy anything." And Harrison told the story once more, as he had done hundreds of times over the years. Each time he told it, he noticed new details, new lessons, new reasons to be grateful. David, who had married Claire the previous year, was hearing the story for the first time. "I can't believe you actually made that offer," he said, laughing. "I did," confirmed Harrison, "and it was the most foolish and most important thing I've ever done in my life." "Why foolish?" "Because I was treating my wife like an object that could be bought." "And why important?" "Because it was the first step toward me becoming a better person." Sarah held her husband's hand. "And I thank you every day for having the courage to change." "I'm the one who thanks you for having the patience to teach me how." James, who was listening to everything with the attention of a curious child, asked a question that silenced the table. "Dad, if you could go back in time, would you make the same proposal to Mom?" Harrison thought carefully before answering. "I would, son, but for the right reasons. Not because I thought I could buy love, but because I would already know that your mother is the most special woman in the world and would deserve every possible care." "And would Mom accept?" "Your mother would never accept a proposal based on money, but she would accept a proposal based on true love." "Is that how she agreed to marry you for real?" "Exactly." James smiled, satisfied with the answer. The family continued to grow and prosper. The Esther Sullivan Medical Center expanded to 10 cities. The foundation trained more than 5,000 nurses. Harrison became a mentor to other entrepreneurs who wanted to use their wealth for social good. Claire specialized in pediatrics and opened a free clinic for underprivileged children. David developed innovative pediatric surgery techniques that saved hundreds of lives. James, even as a child, already showed an interest in medicine and caring for people. At a special family meeting, Harrison made an announcement that surprised everyone. "I've made an important decision about my will." "What decision?" asked Sarah, worried. "I'm going to donate 80% of my fortune to the Esther Sullivan Foundation. The rest will be divided among you, but with the condition that it must always be used to help other people." "Harrison, are you sure?" asked Claire. "Absolutely. Money only has value when it transforms lives, and our foundation has already proven that it knows how to do that better than I ever could alone." "And what if we need more money one day?" asked David, practical. "Then we'll work to earn it, like normal people do. Money that is earned has more value than money that is inherited." Sarah hugged her husband. "Mrs. Martha would be proud of this decision." "I hope so. I hope Esther would be too." "I'm sure they would," said Beatrice, who had become the guardian of the family's memory. Harrison's decision generated comments in the press and inspired other entrepreneurs to rethink their legacies. But for the family, it was simply another natural step in the journey they had begun years ago. The Esther Sullivan Medical Center began receiving visits from professionals from all over the world, interested in learning about the humanized care model. Sarah became an international speaker, always accompanied by Harrison, who told the family's personal story to illustrate how genuine changes were possible. At one of these lectures, held at a health conference in Brasilia, a young nurse asked a question that moved everyone present. "Dr. Sarah, how do you manage to maintain humanized care even with so many patients?" "By remembering that each person is unique and special, by remembering that someone I love may one day need the care of another person, and I would like that person to be treated with kindness." "And you, Mr. Harrison, how do you manage to maintain human values amid so much business success?" "By remembering where I came from and why I changed. My family taught me that true success is measured by the number of lives we manage to touch in a positive way, not by the amount of money we accumulate." After the lecture, several entrepreneurs approached Harrison interested in social partnerships. He carefully chose only those who demonstrated genuine motivation to help, not just an interest in social marketing. Back in Chicago, the family resumed their loving routine. Harrison kept the habit of spending Sunday mornings in the garden with James, teaching his son about plants and about life. "Daddy, why do you and Mommy love each other so much?" "Because we choose to love each other every day, son." "What do you mean?" "Love isn't just a feeling. It's a decision. Every day I decide to take care of your mother, respect her, make her happy. And she does the same for me." "And for me and Claire?" "For you too. Being a father is choosing to love, protect, and teach every day. I'm going to choose to love you forever. And we're going to choose to love you forever too." Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Sarah and Claire were preparing the Sunday lunch that had become a family tradition. "Mom," said Claire, "sometimes I wonder what our life would have been like if you had accepted Dad's first proposal. It would have been very different, probably unhappy." "Why?" "Because it would have started off wrong, based on money, not on true feelings. But you fell in love anyway. We fell in love after we learned to respect each other. True love only grows on a foundation of mutual respect. Is that why David and I work so well together?" "That's why. You met as equals, respected each other from the start, and built your love on solid ground. I want to teach that to my children too. And you will. That's how good family traditions are passed on." In the garden, Harrison was teaching James how to care for the tomatoes. "Look here, son. For a plant to grow strong, it needs 3 things: good soil, water, and sun. Like people, Daddy." "What do you mean?" "People also need a good foundation, care, and affection to grow strong." Harrison stopped what he was doing and looked at his young son with admiration. "You're right. People are like plants. They need solid roots, constant care, and plenty of love." "Does our family have solid roots?" "It does. Grandma Martha and Grandma Esther were our roots. Your mother and I are the trunk. You and Claire are the branches that will keep growing. And are we going to have lots of leaves and fruit? We'll have as many as we can take care of with love." That afternoon, the whole family worked together in the garden. It was an image that Mrs. Martha would have loved to see. 3 generations caring for the earth and for one another with equal devotion. "You know, Harrison," said Sarah as they planted new seedlings, "I still think about that first day sometimes. Me too. And I always get embarrassed by my attitude." "You shouldn't. That attitude brought you to me. How can you see the positive side of such a disrespectful proposal?" "Because I learned that people sometimes do wrong things for the right reasons. Your reason was right, saving your mother. It was only the method that was wrong. And you were able to separate the reason from the method." "I learned that from my grandmother. She always said to look for the intention behind the action. Your grandmother was very wise." "She was, and she raised a very wise woman too," said Harrison, kissing his wife. "Daddy," shouted James, "stop kissing and come see. The tomato plant is already sprouting." Everyone ran to see the tiny green seedling that had pushed up through the soil. "It's a miracle," said Claire. "It's not a miracle," corrected Harrison. "It's the result of care, patience, and love, just like our family. Years passed once again. James grew up and became a young man devoted to his studies and his family. Claire had 3 children who grew up hearing the same stories about love, choice and care that had marked previous generations. Harrison, now with grey hair, kept the same energy and dedication as always. Sarah, at 45, had become one of the most respected nurses in the country, a reference in humanized hospital care. The Esther Sullivan Medical Center celebrated its 15th anniversary with a special party. During the celebration, Harrison did what everyone expected. He once again told the story of how it all began. 15 years ago, I was a lost man who made the most idiotic proposal of his life to an extraordinary nurse, but this time it was James, now 12 years old, who completed the story. And the nurse said no to the idiotic proposal, but yes to helping the lost man find himself again. That's right, my son. And they fell in love for the right reasons. Exactly. And they formed the most united family in the world. The most united of all, confirmed Sarah, moved by her son's ability to understand and tell the family story. That night, at home, Harrison found Sarah on the porch, looking at the stars. "What are you thinking about?" "About how different our life is from what I imagined when I was 28. Better or worse? Infinitely better. I imagined a simple life, taking care of patients, maybe marrying some doctor or nurse. I never imagined I would become part of such a special family. And I imagined a solitary life, accumulating money and professional success. I never imagined I would discover that true wealth is love. Do you regret anything? Nothing. Every mistake I made brought me here. Every wrong decision taught me to make the right choices. Even that initial proposal, especially that proposal, it showed me who I really was at that moment and gave me the motivation to change." Sarah leaned against her husband's shoulder. "Harrison?" "Yes?" "If one day someone made a similar proposal to Claire, what would you say?" "I would tell her to do exactly what you did. Refuse the proposal, but help the person find the right path." "Good answer. I learned from the best." The next day, the family received a special visit. It was Arthur, the man who had told James Miller's story years ago. Now 89 years old, he remained lucid and active. "Mr. Arthur," said Harrison, hugging the elderly man. "What a pleasant surprise. I came to visit you and meet the new generation of the family." James approached timidly. "Are you the man who told Dad about Grandpa James?" "I am, young man. And you must be the new James." "I am. I received the name of the grandfather I never met." "Your grandfather would be very proud of you. You think so?" "I'm sure of it. He was a good, hard-working young man who loved his family above all else. Just like you'll be when you grow up." Harrison watched the conversation with emotion. Even after so many years, he still got emotional when someone spoke fondly about his father. "Mr. Arthur," said Sarah, "would you like to have lunch with us?" "It would be an honor." During lunch, Arthur told more stories about the old days in Milwaukee. He talked about Esther, about the young Martha, about James Miller, and about how that simple community took care of one another. "You recreated that community here," he observed. "The hospital, the foundation, the way you take care of each other. It's exactly what existed in Milwaukee back then." "That's true," agreed Harrison. "Without realizing it, we were trying to rebuild what my mother had lost when she left there. And you succeeded. Esther would be very proud." After lunch, Arthur asked to visit Mrs. Martha's grave. There he spoke softly to the headstone, as if it were a conversation between old friends. "Martha, my dear, you raised a wonderful son, and he found a perfect family. You can rest in peace knowing your mission was accomplished." Harrison, watching from afar, was moved by the old friend's simple farewell. When Arthur left, he gave the family a box of old photographs he had kept for decades. They were images of Milwaukee in the 1970s, including several photos of Esther, of young Martha, and even a rare photo of James Miller. "Look at this," said Sarah, holding a photo where Esther appeared caring for an elderly man. "My grandmother was already providing humanized care 50 years ago." "And your mother learned by observing," Harrison noted, pointing to a photo where young Martha was helping Esther. "It's incredible how everything connects," said Claire. "3 generations of caregivers." "4," corrected James. "I'm going to take care of people when I grow up too." "What kind of care do you want to provide?" asked Sarah. "I don't know yet, but I want to do it like you all, with a lot of love." The family spent hours looking at the old photos and connecting stories. Each image revealed more details about the roots of their family tree of the heart. One of the photos showed Esther teaching young Martha how to dress a child's wound. "Look at Grandma Martha's concentration," observed Claire. "She was always careful." "And look at the tenderness in Esther's teaching," added Sarah. "My grandmother truly loved teaching." "Now I understand why you're such a great teacher too," said Harrison. "You inherited that from your grandmother, and you inherited Mrs. Martha's generous heart." "We all inherit the best qualities from the people who raised us," said Beatrice, who was joining the conversation. "This is how love perpetuates itself through generations." That night Harrison had a special inspiration. "Sarah, how about we create a historical archive about our family?" "What do you mean?" "Document our entire history, the old photos, Esther's letters, the documents, the stories we've heard, so James and the future grandchildren can know where they came from." "I love the idea. Claire can help with the digital part." "And I can write the stories," offered Beatrice. "I've always enjoyed writing." The family archive project became a collective passion. Each member contributed their memories and skills. Claire digitized the photos, David organized the events chronologically, Beatrice wrote the narratives, James made illustrative drawings, and Harrison and Sarah supervised everything. The result was a complete family book, which began with Esther and ended with James as a child. They printed several copies, one for each family member, and a few extras to preserve in the hospital's archive. During the family book launch, Harrison read the preface he had written. "This is the story of a family formed by choices of the heart. It began with Esther choosing to care for Martha. It continued with Martha choosing to raise me as her son. It flourished when I chose to become a better person to deserve their love. And it is completed with Sarah choosing to be part of this love story. May future generations always remember, family is a choice, love is care, and true wealth is having people to love and to be loved by them." Everyone applauded, but it was James who made the most touching comment. "Dad, I'm going to keep this book forever and tell these stories to my children too." "And they'll tell them to their children," added Claire. "This is how love becomes eternal," concluded Sarah. The years kept passing. Harrison turned 60, still active and in love with his wife. Sarah, at 55, had become one of the most influential nurses in the country. Claire was a mother of 4 and ran 3 pediatric clinics. James, at 15, had already decided to study medicine to continue the family legacy. On a special afternoon, the family gathered in the original garden of the Esther Sullivan Medical Center to celebrate 20 years since Harrison and Sarah's first meeting. 20 years, said Harrison in disbelief. "It seems like yesterday that I made that silly proposal." "To me, it feels like a whole lifetime," Sarah replied. "A whole lifetime of love and learning." "Mum," said Claire, "tell my children how it all began." The 4 grandchildren sat on the grass, ready to hear the story they already knew by heart, but loved to listen to. "It all began," Sarah said in a theatrical voice, "when your grandfather was a very rich but very lost man, and he made a very silly proposal to your grandma," finished the youngest granddaughter, only 4 years old. "That's right. And Grandma said, she said some things can't be bought," all the children shouted in chorus. And then Grandpa learned to truly love and became the best husband and daddy in the world. And Grandma became the happiest wife in the world." Harrison and Sarah looked at each other with the mature love of those who had built an entire life together. "And did they live happily ever after?" asked the middle grandson. "They lived happily ever after," all the adults confirmed together. But the real story was far from over. James entered medical school, Claire expanded her clinics to serve more underprivileged children, Harrison was invited to be a government advisor on public health policies, and Sarah wrote a book on humanized nursing that became a worldwide reference. The Esther Sullivan Foundation grew so much that it began operating in other Latin American countries. Whenever they opened a new unit, the whole family took part in the inauguration, telling the love story that had given rise to everything. On one of these trips, to inaugurate a hospital in Peru, Harrison and Sarah were walking through Lima when he suddenly stopped. "Sarah, I have a confession to make." "What confession?" "Sometimes I still can't believe you fell in love with me." "Why not?" "Because when we met, I was truly a terrible man, arrogant, materialistic, clueless. But you changed." "I changed because you inspired me to change, because I saw through your eyes how I could be better." "Harrison, you didn't change. You just stopped hiding who you really were beneath all that armor of money and success." "How can you be so sure?" "Because the man who made that desperate proposal out of love for his mother is the same man who today devotes his life to caring for other families. The love was always there. It just needed to find the right direction." Harrison embraced his wife right there, in the middle of the busy street in Lima. "I love you, Sarah Sullivan Reed." "And I love you, Harrison Reed. Forever." Back in Brazil, the family received news that filled them with pride. James, at 18, had been accepted into the best medical school in the country, with a full scholarship for academic merit. "Son, you did it," said Harrison, hugging the young man. "We did it, Dad. Our whole family did it, because you both taught me that studying and helping people is the most important thing in life." "Grandma Martha would be so proud," said Sarah, deeply moved. "She is proud," Claire corrected. "Wherever she is, she's watching it all and smiling." The celebration party was held at the hospital, like all the family's important celebrations. Patients, staff, and volunteers participated, turning the medical environment into a place of joy and hope. During the party, an elderly patient approached Harrison. "Mr. Reed, can I tell you something?" "Of course, Maria. You saved my life." "Me? How?" "Not only by curing my illness, but by showing that there are still good people in the world. You and your family gave me back my faith in humanity." Harrison was moved by the simple yet profound words of the elderly woman. "Maria, it was our medical team and nursing staff who saved your life." "No, sir. What saved my life was the love you put into everything you do. That love is contagious. It heals. It transforms." "Thank you for such kind words. May I ask you a personal question?" "Go ahead." "How do you and Dr. Sarah manage to keep so much love after so many years of marriage?" Harrison smiled. "By choosing to love every day, by taking care of each other, by always remembering why we fell in love." "And why did you fall in love?" "Because she taught me to be a better person. And she fell in love because she saw in me the potential to change." "What a beautiful story." "It's our story. And the best part is that it's still being written every day." Donna Maria stepped away with a smile on her face, carrying with her another dose of hope that the Reed family spread wherever they went. At the end of the party, when everyone was leaving, Harrison stepped up to the makeshift stage for one final speech. "Friends, thank you for sharing our joy once again. The Esther Sullivan Medical Center is not just a hospital. It is proof that love multiplies love, that care generates more care, and that united families can transform the world around them." The crowd applauded, but Harrison continued. "I want to take this opportunity to make a special announcement. James, our youngest son, was just accepted into medical school. In a few years, we'll have the third generation of the family working here with us." More applause, now even warmer. "But the most important thing is not that he'll be a doctor. The most important thing is that he's a good person, as he learned at home. Because medicine without humanity is just technique, and technique without love doesn't truly heal." James climbed onto the stage and hugged his father. "Dad, I want to promise you something, and everyone here too." "What is it, son?" "I promise to honor our family by being the best doctor and the best person I can possibly be, and when I have my own children, I'll tell them the story of how it all started with a crazy proposal that became the greatest love story in the world." The crowd was moved by the young man's mature words. "And I promise," he added, that our family will keep caring for people forever, because that's what Grandma Martha and Grandma Esther taught us, and that's what you all carried on." Harrison couldn't hold back his tears. "Your son is right," said a voice from the crowd. It was Dr. Sterling, the doctor who had cared for Mrs. Martha years ago. "This family proves that true love can heal anything and transform anyone." That night at home, the family gathered one last time to talk about the special day they had experienced. "Dad," said Claire, "do you remember exactly the words you used in that first proposal to Mom?" Harrison laughed, embarrassed. "I do," I said. "If you heal my mother, you can call me your husband." "And what did Mom answer?" "That some things can't be bought," answered Sarah. "And she was right," said James, "because you did get married, but for the right reason." "Exactly. We got married because we truly fell in love, not because of some bizarre arrangement." "And did Grandma Martha get healed?" "She did," said Harrison. "But not because your mother agreed to marry me. She got healed because we found our mother and son love again, and because your mother cared for her with her heart." "So everyone came out ahead?" "Everyone came out ahead," confirmed Sarah. Beatrice, who was part of the conversation, made an observation that touched everyone. "You know what impresses me most about this story?" "What, Aunt Beatrice?" "That it began with someone trying to buy love and ended with a family that spreads love freely to everyone." "That's true," agreed Harrison. "The irony of life." "It's not irony," said James with a child's wisdom. "It's transformation. Dad transformed, Mom transformed, all of us transformed. And now we transform other people too." "Our little philosopher," joked Sarah, ruffling the boy's hair. "I learned from you," he answered simply. That was the last great family gathering with all the original members present. Beatrice passed away peacefully 2 years later, at 84 years old, surrounded by the love and care of the family she had learned to love. Beatrice's funeral was a celebration of life. She had asked that, instead of sadness, there be music and joyful stories. The family honored her request, turning the farewell into a gathering of gratitude. "Aunt Beatrice spent the last years of her life being genuinely happy," said Harrison during the ceremony. "You found purpose caring for other people at the hospital. You found family in us, and you taught us that it's never too late to discover our calling to do good." After the funeral, the family gathered at home for a simple dinner, just as Aunt Beatrice would have wanted. "Do you know what Aunt Beatrice told me a week before she passed?" Sarah commented. "What was it?" "That she had seen many wealthy families destroy themselves over greed and self-interest, but that our family taught her that money can indeed build love when used with wisdom and generosity." She was right, Harrison agreed. Money in itself is neither good nor bad. It depends on how it's used. "And did we use it well?" asked James, now 17 years old. "I think so, son. We built hospitals, trained professionals, helped families, and created a solid foundation for our own family. If that isn't using money well, I don't know what is. And most importantly," Claire added, "you taught us that money can never be more important than people." "Exactly. People always come first." Months went by. James was getting ready to start college when something happened that tested the family's unity once again. Harrison received an offer to sell all of his companies to an international group. The amount offered was astronomical, enough to multiply his fortune tenfold. "Sarah, I need to talk to you about something important." "I'm listening." "I received an offer to sell everything, all the companies, all the investments." "And what did you say?" "I said I needed to talk to my family first." "And what do you want to do?" "I want to turn it down." "Why?" "Because our companies aren't just a source of income. They're tools for our social projects. If I sell, we lose control over how the money is used." "And what does the family think?" "I haven't asked anyone yet." "I wanted to hear your opinion first." Sarah thought carefully before answering. "Harrison, you know I support you in any decision, but I need to ask you something. Are you turning this down out of fear of change or out of genuine conviction? Out of conviction. I don't want our work to become just another profit-focused company. Then you have my full approval. That night, Harrison gathered the whole family to discuss the offer. To his surprise, everyone agreed with his position. "Dad," said Claire, "our name is tied to care and humanization. We can't risk losing that for money." "I agree," said James. "When I graduate, I want to work at a company that still has our family's values." "David?" asked Harrison. "Harrison, you all built something unique. It would be a shame to undo all of it for money we don't even need." The next day, Harrison called the interested buyers and politely declined the offer. "Mr. Reed, may I ask why you're turning down such a favorable offer?" "Because some things aren't for sale," he replied, remembering the words Sarah had said 20 years earlier. "Everything has a price, sir." "No, it doesn't. Family legacy, values, purpose in life. Those things have no price because they're irreplaceable." Harrison's refusal generated comments in the business press. Some called him sentimental, others called him a smart strategist. But to his family, he had simply made the right choice once again. The decision brought the family even closer together. They realized they were truly aligned in their values and priorities. 2 years later, James started medical school with a family celebration at the hospital. All the staff participated, from doctors to the cleaning crew. To the Reed family, everyone was equally important. "James," said Harrison during the celebration, "now you're about to begin a new journey. Want some advice from your father?" "I always want your advice, Dad. Never forget why you chose medicine. It wasn't for prestige or money, it was to care for people. When the pressure of your studies becomes overwhelming, when you grow tired, remember that." "I will remember. And I'll also remember how our family began, with genuine care. And how will it end? With genuine care as well, forever." The family embraced James collectively, as they did at every important moment. That night, Harrison and Sarah were alone for the first time in years. All their children were in their own homes or at college. "It's strange, isn't it?" Sarah said. "The house empty again. But it's a different kind of emptiness than the one I had before I met you." "What do you mean?" "Before, it was the loneliness of abandonment. Now it's the temporary solitude of someone who has a family that's spread out but still united." Perfect definition. And you know what else? "What?" "I still feel like a lucky man every morning when I wake up and see you by my side. Even after 22 years. Especially after 22 years. Because now I know our love is solid, tested, real. And I still feel like the luckiest woman in the world for having turned down your first proposal and agreed to get to know who you truly were. Do you regret anything?" "Nothing. Every hardship, every challenge, every difficult moment brought us here. And here is the perfect place to be." They spent the night talking about future plans, about the grandchildren they hoped to have, about new projects for the foundation, about dreams they still wanted to fulfill together. "Harrison," Sarah said before falling asleep. "Yes? Thank you for becoming the husband of my dreams. Thank you for teaching me how to be that husband." And so, 22 years after an absurd proposal in a hospital corridor, Harrison and Sarah continued choosing to love each other every single day, building a legacy of care and transformation that touched thousands of lives. The story that had begun with desperation and ignorance had transformed into the most beautiful proof that people can change, families can be chosen, and true love can be born from the most unlikely circumstances. James followed in the family's footsteps and became an exceptional doctor. Claire expanded her work to care for children in vulnerable situations. The Esther Sullivan Foundation continued to grow and touch lives across the entire continent, and Harrison and Sarah, now with grey hair and hearts even more united, continued to prove every day that the best marriage proposal is not made with money, but with love, respect, and mutual devotion. The end of the story. So, dear listener, what did you think of this story of transformation and true love? Tell us in the comments whether you believe people can truly change when they find the right reasons. Leave your like if the story touched your heart, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel to hear more emotional stories like this one. Your company means so much to us.